And with that, I will start, and I am going to start with my human introduction, and then I'm going to break my own rules and also share a little bit about myself in the context of my role and organization, because we are hosting. My name's Debbie Franco. I am as I said, a dog mom. I feel the most at home when I am out in the upper watersheds of California and other watersheds that we share with other states, with the people who are from those places. I just um, have never felt so grounded as when I'm in a place with the people who live and work there every day and are intimately connected to the place that they're stewarding, frankly, for all the rest of us. Um, I am also the CEO of the Watershed Solutions Network, and I want to welcome you all here and express my appreciation for joining us. We're super excited to be having this discussion today and looking forward to building together in this collaborative space of figuring out watershed scale. I also spent 10 years in the Governor's Office of Planning and Research before joining WSN, where I was the senior advisor for water and rural affairs. Super long and ridiculous title. And I also participated in the Forest Management Task Force. So I've been at this trying to connect the dots for a long time. I want to take a minute to introduce my team who also are here and can be helpful to you. So, Joan Clayburg is, if you can wave your hand, folks can see you, and Alyssa Patterson, Angelica Dow, and Audrey Allison. We are Watershed Solutions Network. If you have a question or need any kind of technical assistance, you can shoot any of them a direct message in your chat, and you should keep an eye out for messages from them so that you can stick with the program. Um, we are super glad to have so many new people here today. We've been doing these workshops. Actually, I should have counted. I think this might be number six, number seven, somewhere in there. We started small and we keep growing and growing and growing. And so I am going to take a minute to introduce folks to WSN. For those of you who have been showing up for our workshops, you can maybe now is the time to go get tea. Um, Watershed Solutions Network. We are more than 150 strong now. We started as an intensive cohort experience where we brought between 20 and 30 leaders in the land and water sectors together for cohort experiences that spanned a year. We focused on building systems thinking and collaborative capacity and helping people to struggle through how you meaningfully center equity. We are intentionally cross-sector and cross-jurisdictional. So watershed, people's default is, oh, you must do water. Well, we actually think of watersheds as the full watershed system that includes all of us and all the things that we do and all of the functions of a watershed. So that's the people, the place, the wild things, the economy, the communities, etc. We really are focused on connecting people, places, and policies, and that's reflected in all of the programs that we do. And our main focus is on figuring out how we connect people, places, and policy to get to watershed scale. So this is, as I said, our virtual workshop series. We hold these workshops the fourth Thursday of each month. We cover a broad range of topics, all with an eye toward promoting systems thinking, cross-pollinating. We like to bring unique voices together, building understanding across sectors and perspectives, and engaging our participants in generating new ideas and opportunities together. We are not your usual workshop. We spend as little time presenting and talking as we can, and we try to spend as much time as we can getting people together in breakouts to actually talk about and synthesize the material and information to meet each other, and to come up with new ideas together. We have a pretty solid set of core values that I'd like to invite everyone who's participating to honor. We hope people show up and are candid and authentic. And we also expect that everyone who participates will honor that vulnerability and practice what we call contextual confidentiality. And what we mean by that is we want people to share what you've learned as you participated in our workshops, but we're not inviting you to quote other people's stories or to take things out of the context of the workshop. Like, we really want people to feel like they can be honest and open and not worry that someone's gonna get them in trouble, down the road. Oh, did you hear what so and so said? We really ask you to honor that value of contextual confidentiality. If there is something you hear that down the road you would like to share with other people and the context of who said it is relevant, then please reach out to us and we will connect you up with the person who said it so that they can decide whether or not they're comfortable with you sharing what you'd like to share. We also intentionally bring people together across differences, and that can be stressful and it can create resistance. And so we invite folks to honor our value of listening with curiosity. And that's especially when you feel uncomfortable. The minute you feel that tension start to grow in your body, that's when we invite you to take a deep breath and to remember that this is just a conversation. No one in this conversation has any kind of authority over you. And so see if you can invite yourself to be curious about what you're hearing that's making you feel discomfort. And then during the breakouts, please remember to make space for everyone to engage. These are unmoderated, unfacilitated breakouts. And so we are asking all of you to step up and step back as appropriate to make the breakouts as engaging and accessible as they can be for all of the participants. So that's already long-winded. I'm going to continue on and share with you what we're doing and what we're not doing in this workshop. So we are going to ask the question of how Prop 4 guidelines across our state programs can catalyze cross-sector and watershed scale action. We are not suggesting that that's the only thing that Prop 4 guidelines should do. We are just focusing our attention here. There's oodles of analysis asking the question of how Prop 4 can promote a variety of things, and that's great and awesome. And we are not trying to disrupt that space. We are trying to be complementary and additive to that space. And we also, I know there are folks on in this space right now with us who are feeling a deep sense of urgency to get things done, like making communities fire safe and getting folks safe drinking water. I mean, there are definitely urgent issues. And I just want to be clear that where a watershed approach can be additive, supportive, complementary, great. And we're not arguing that this should get in the way of doing any of that important work. We do, though, have a strong bias toward collaboration and coordination, and we believe that we can get faster, we can get farther faster together, locally, regionally, and at watershed scale. And we're gonna, I should say, in a moment, I'm gonna present our theory of watershed scale that we're gonna invite you all to chew on. Um, and I also am not suggesting that everything has to happen at watershed scale. I think one of the questions before us is how do we decide what the right scale is to take on a particular activity? By watershed scale, we mean headwaters to outflows, including engineered connections and including groundwater. Basically, we're about reconnecting all of the dots. Um, this is not, as I said earlier, designed as a primer on Prop 4. we will be talking about some elements of the proposition. Fortunately, California Natural Resources Agency has put together a marvelous tracking page. And so I think one of my team members is going to drop a link to that in the chat. So you can find all the most current information on that tracking page. And there are actually people in our workshop who are part of coordinating and facilitating that. Um, we really want to invite you to step outside of the boxes that are created by chapters and sections in a law, to put your systems thinking caps on and to look for possibility. So really, it's so easy to think, oh, that's impossible. Well, it's going to be impossible unless we figure it out together. So we're really inviting you for the next couple of hours to just resist the temptation to be pessimistic, to be sure that this is impossible, and to journey with us through this conversation to figure out what does it look like? What do we need to do it? What values could we find in getting to watershed scale? And how does that translate into how these dollars that are coming across the desk eventually might be best deployed? So, with that, I am going to take a moment and introduce Anne Marie and Mary. Anne Marie is joining us from the Department of Water Resources, and Mary is joining us from the Department of Conservation. I invited both DWR and Department of Conservation because there are, I would say, some definite low-hanging fruit opportunities to figure out how those programs might align to help us get to watershed scale. I'd love to give you the floor just to share where your agent or your department is in the Prop 4 process. There's Mary.
Sure, I can hop in. Thanks. Thank you, Debbie. Hi, everyone. Like you heard, my name is Mary. I work at the Department of Conservation for the Regional Forest and Fire Capacity Program, or the RFFC program. Um, so I think some of you are familiar. I see some familiar faces, but in case you're not familiar with our program, we are a block grant, a non-competitive block grant program that gives out grants to places in high to very high fire hazard severity zones. And I'm trying to avoid getting too technical, but basically the objectives of our program is to build the capacity and planning efforts of place-based practitioners and partnerships to work at the regional scale. And to do that, we're asking these partnerships and collaboratives to evaluate their landscapes, evaluate their community needs, develop projects, and then work to prioritize those projects into really a steady stream of work that can happen over a long period of time. Often we talk about 5 to 10 years. And our program is cool because it funds everything that it takes to do that, including organizational capacity building, workforce and career development, literally just meeting with people, talking to people so that new relationships can be developed and deepened, and new partnerships can be formed. And we also focus quite a bit on aligning existing planning efforts as an expectation, since we're asking whole regions to create these region scale planning efforts. We really want that to align and work with existing efforts and leverage those opportunities where they can. So it's a little bit of background about our program. The climate bond allocates $185 million to our program. We're really excited about that. The bond language basically aligns with what our program has done before. So, we'll more or less be continuing our program's work, but also expanding into some new spaces as well. Of course, we'll be complying with everything that comes with bond program requirements, but the new space we're excited to enter is implementation. So far, we fund everything leading up to implementation, save a few demonstration projects, but the bond language calls out implementation as part of our program now, so we'll be entering that space as well. We are really taking this opportunity to of course, update our program guidelines to meet those, be in compliance with running a bond program, but also really apply a lot of the feedback we've gotten just throughout the years of running the program. We have a pretty close relationship, I would say, with our network of grantees. But we formally kicked off engagement with the listening session last year to really ask and hear from folks what they want to see changed in the RFFC program and what they'd like to see remain the same. So generally, I think for changes, people are really excited and specifically asked for implementation funding, as well as and specifically reserving funding for those really high priority implementation projects, and then as much as possible flexible implementation funding. Less of a focus on acres, more of a focus on practitioner driven metrics and reporting. We also heard, in terms of having things remain the same, really loud and clear, this desire to maintain capacity building funding, capacity building being an ongoing need, and just hearing how valuable it is to fund, like I said earlier, fund people being able to just meet and talk to each other, show up to meetings, and take the time that it takes to build partnerships and meaningful relationships that can really last beyond a grant cycle. So that's my big info dump about our program, but where we are in updating our grant guidelines. So like I said, we've been doing outreach since last fall and working on updating those guidelines that are out now, or updating our current guidelines, I should say. We're concurrently doing tribal consultation as well as more informal engagement with tribes across California. That's been an area of improvement we've been aiming to apply since we've started the program. And you all can look out for our draft guidelines coming online and open for public comment in the next few months. Our general deadline, we've been saying, is spring 2026. And that is likely going to mean March or April. And we're really shooting for March, if possible, to just get things out as soon as possible. So we'll have a public scoping period where all comments are open. We really welcome feedback, and we really do try to address everything that we hear. And that'll help us get final guidelines out in the summer this year, and really fingers crossed that we can actually get into some grant agreements at the end of this year, early next year. And that's sort of where we're at. And I think once things will be, once our draft guidelines are out for public comment, we'll be sure to be sending an email blast, and there'll be updates on our website as well. So we look forward to hearing from you all.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you so much.
Anne Marie, would you like to follow Mary?
Yeah. I don't have a lot to say. I really want to hear what you all have to say. But I did want to be sure and mention, so I guess first off, my name's Anne Marie Orr, and I'm the current program manager at the Financial Assistance Branch of TWR over our urban drought programs. And I'll be overseeing the Prop 4 Watershed Resilience grant program that's under development now. And as part of the Watershed Resilience Grant Program, we're combining funding from two different parts of Prop 4. There's Section 91019, which focuses on projects that increase conservation in ag and urban areas, as well as Section 91031, which is for projects that improve climate resilience on a watershed basis. So that I also I think it's highlighted as in this workshop to complete the survey that we have out right now, and I would encourage everyone to please do so, because we are right at the beginning of this program and we're developing things or developing the solicitation. We'd like to get your feedback on it. So at the top of the chat, I put in the link to that survey, and it will be open up until March 6th. So please fill it out. It's relatively short. We're currently developing our plan for outreach. And the first webinar we're going to be having is April 30th. So please save the date. We haven't announced it yet. It's tentative, but I believe it's solid enough to mention in this forum. So do please save the date for that. Now in that workshop or webinar, we will be addressing both this watershed resilience program I just mentioned, as well as we also have an roughly $330 million solicitation that's going to be geared towards regional conveyance projects and groundwater projects that are as dictated by sections 91018 and 91012 of the proposition. I think that is all I really wanted to convey today, and now I would just really like to hear from you all.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. And we also will resend the link out to the survey after the workshop. So, and we're hoping you all will take some of what we have in conversation today and help feed that into the workshop content, to the survey contents. All right, so if I could invite my team to throw up the PowerPoint. We try not to do slides in these workshops, but again, since we have a chunk of folks who are brand new to our little universe here, I'm going to use some slides. But just so you know who you're here, who's hosting you here, we're the Watershed Solutions Network. We're a network of more than 150 people who've been through our programming, developing the capacity to do systems thinking and to be better collaborators. And we really, at our core, what we're working toward is cultivating communities that equitably steward thriving watersheds. We have a core belief that that's an important pathway toward climate resilience and the thriving, amazing California that we can be. So, again, the focus of this workshop today is on how we can leverage our watersheds to be better at, improve our capacity, efficiency, ability to sustainably manage natural resources. And we, in particular, are interested in how we do that, how we find those synergies that get us from headwaters to outflow and better align our human and natural systems. And then we're going to talk about how does that fit into the rubric that's in Prop 4. So we are. Gosh, it's so interesting. I wrote these slides before I knew who was going to be here, and I feel like there are so many people who are here who should be saying these words instead of me. But I'm going to say them, and hopefully they're resonating. California continues to grapple with how we align human systems with natural systems. It's all our conversation about nature-based solutions. We've made some progress, and we should celebrate that. But we've done a lot of it in discrete focus areas. And there may be, and I hope you'll agree with us by the end of the workshop, that there are system level synergies that could help us all go farther, faster together. We think the opportunity is that's before us is to figure out like how do we best leverage a huge investment in California in our water, land, and communities. How do we leverage that to continue building that human infrastructure that's really essentially how we survive together. The dollars may come and go, but how we organize ourselves is what we have to work with, whether we have the dollars coming in the door or not. And I think that's an especially important consideration in these current conditions where we've had a bit of whiplash over time. We've had watershed coordinators, and they were popular, and we funded them, and they were bringing people together. Then they lost their political support, and so we shifted from watershed coordinators to IRWMs, and we built and invested in IRWMs, and then the political winds shifted. fires happened, and we have RFFC regions. And that's just in one little neighborhood. We also have economic development regions, and we have all this overlapping human infrastructure. And so the question is there a way that we can build forward together where we've got the human infrastructure in order, and whatever the flavor of the day, it filters into the existing human infrastructure without folks on the ground having to reorient themselves, reorganize themselves every time there's a shift. And GSA is like, where do they fit in all of it? We've got so many organizational structures and bodies. We're curious at WSN, is there a way that we can connect and coordinate that might help everyone? So this may seem like a rudimentary question, but what we've found in a lot of our work is that we enter a place, especially if it's cross-sector, especially or federal, state, or if there are people who've been talking within their bubble, and then we bring another bubble in, we found that often people are using the same words but meaning different things. And so we start with, what is a watershed? And none of these are right or wrong answers, but this is just to give our conversation some context. So technical definitions, we've got a USGS definition, a NOAA definition. They're pretty similar and aligned, but very technically focused, and most focused on how water moves across the landscape. For WSN and for what we believe is a more practical management approach, a watershed truly is everything in it. So it's the forests and headwaters, it's the floodplains, it's the groundwater, the estuaries, it's actually even the ocean, which, even I didn't put the ocean here. But our watersheds include the ocean. It's all the human systems that are embedded in those landscapes and managing those water resources. And for us, headwaters are from the peak to the outflow and everything in between. And we include the engineered parts because we're trying to look at how to connect up all the pieces that are interdependent with each other. And so it's complex, it's messy, and it's the system we live in. So that's how that's when I say watersheds, I mean that practical definition. So then the next question is, what do we mean by watershed health? And I think that I'm going to tell you what we think in at very high level, but I think this is a really important question we should all be asking ourselves. Is watershed health adding up all the pieces, or are we missing something if we say that a healthy forest plus a healthy river plus healthy communities plus a healthy economy, if we make those additive and say if all of those are healthy at the same time, then we have a healthy watershed. Have we missed something in that? Is that quintessentially true? Again, these are questions we're asking. I'm not purporting to have an answer, and I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer, but I think it's worth us taking a moment to ask ourselves, what do we mean when we say that watershed health or watershed resilience? For us, we want to have it at least be clear that it's both ecosystem of which humans are actually a part, though we tend to not we are not always aware of that, and community health, but both are very interdependent and intertwined. And ultimately, we think that watershed health, a healthy watershed, is going to be much more climate resilient, but that's not a static thing. That's like in motion. So we need watersheds and people in watersheds that are actively communicating with each other, actively adapting as the system changes faster than it ever has in our recent human past. So the reason we think watershed scale matters is because we pay a price for silos. By taking it, I mean, there are also benefits, just to be clear. We are able to narrow in and solve critical problems. But the cost that we pay is breaking interdependent systems into subsets. This can make it harder to act quickly. it can embed inequities in how we act, and it often leaves resources stranded across jurisdictional boundaries. I hope when you do get into your breakout groups that you spend a little bit of time thinking about and talking about where we've stranded assets when we have, for instance, a watershed that ends at a dam, and then everything else is seen as separate from it that's below the dam. Like what opportunities have we missed by looking at the system in that fashion? And then we think there's an advantage of working at watershed scale, or at least thinking and coordinating at watershed scale, because there are lots of opportunities that we are only just now hitting the initial cusp of. And we think a lot of the transformational opportunities are in the system synergies. And those tend to be invisible when we manage by sector or jurisdiction alone. My favorite poster child to exemplify this is imagining how a watershed might be different, how the health might be impacted if we made a commitment to improve soil health from the top of a watershed to the bottom in a coordinated way. We do definitely do some really good work in specific areas, but what if we imagined having healthy soil from the top to the bottom of the watershed? And you can think of all the benefits of healthy soil, like, the landscape being more spongy, being better at growing things, being helping to retain uh, snow in the upper watersheds, slowing the water down and allowing for storage in places that right now the water might rush through. Lots of opportunities when you start thinking about the synergies across a system. The thing that where we plug in is we think that the foundation for figuring all this out is trust and shared understanding. And so, like I said in the beginning, when we walk into a community or when we bring people together across a region, what we find is and especially across sectors, we find this sense of competition sometimes, this lack of knowing each other, which if you don't know each other, then it's hard to trust each other. Sometimes it's outright distrust, and often a shocking lack of shared understanding. And so I mean, it's such low-hanging fruit, and it's something that Kamiar, who is among us, has talked about a lot and referred to as the soft things being the hardest to do. This is true. It's also potentially where we find the most durable outcomes. As long as people are hanging together, then I have hope people will figure it out. Whether the dollars come, whether catastrophe comes, when we are in that moment of super healthy watersheds, it's not like we stop there and we all go home. Like when we get there, there's ongoing management and cooperation and collaboration that has to support us staying in that space. So really for us, we're focused on this space of building the relationships, pulling people together that might not be talking to each other, and at least starting with shared understanding. That's, just the foundation. And again, some places are already doing this marvelously, and let's help them keep doing it. And then let's help figure out how to get that moving, built on, expanded in the places where it's not happening. So a number of years ago, WSN received funding to develop what we ultimately called the Watershed Framework. Again, some of you in the audience were part of this process. We started the conversation that included land and water leaders from around the state, including Forest Service and RCDs and state agency folks, and just the full tribal folks, EJ folks, the full gamut of the folks that you would want to inform this conversation. And we asked the question, how do we get to watershed scale? And to be honest, as the conversation evolved, really, we don't know. We haven't done it yet. And so what we ended up building instead of a step, we were going to give you all the blueprint. Instead, what we ended up creating is a framework of activities that we think will support watersheds in figuring it out. We are California. We are one of the most diverse states in the nation. we have there really is no one size fits all. And so what we hope the framework will do is provide a set of activities that we invite folks and are happy to facilitate folks moving through to figure it out together. So that group of folks came up with a set of principles. Again, it was a really amazing diversity of people across the land and water sectors. And there was common agreement on these principles that time is of the essence and that we should be leaning into nimble, flexible, and timely opportunities to act. And that we shouldn't wait for, I think I hear Kamiyara's voice in this too. We shouldn't wait for perfect conditions. We just need to move together. That interconnected action is what will help us get over some of the speed bumps that we've been stuck on. Trust and equity have to be the foundation. Affordability, we have to keep an eye toward affordability because if we build things that no one can afford, what have we done? Collaboration and stewardship. Um, there was a very strong interest in the group in figuring out how we could reduce redundancies and conflict through collaboration, through coordination at watershed scale by making those boundaries that we have artificially created in our human minds a little more transparent. There was the idea that there's opportunity that we haven't been able to plumb yet. And then what I loved the most actually in this crowd was this idea of shifting out of this headset that we've been in for decades, where mostly it feels like we're spending our days trying to prevent bad things from happening and trying to shift that toward figuring out how we can create a space where we can catalyze good outcomes together. And with the caveat, of course, that it has to be grounded in transparency and accountability. But what would the world look like if we trusted each other? If we imagined that our upstream and downstream neighbors and our cross-sector collaborators were all pulling in the same, like we all wanted the same thing. We all wanted a healthy watershed. We all wanted to have water for our human needs. We all wanted a beautiful and healthy landscape, and we all wanted to be able to pay our bills. I mean, what if we could start there, and then ask ourselves what good things could we do together, founded on that shared set of values. I know it might sound a little Pollyanna, but I think especially in these days and times, it's such a hopeful message, and I was so excited that that was part of the conversation that came out of our framework discussion. So I had no idea um, who who might show up today. I mean, I had a little idea from registrations, but I tried to cast a broad net over the potential opportunities that exist at watershed scale that are harder to access from silos. Floodmar, that's the Ferromar, those are two obvious ones that are well down the road in being developed and explored. And again, well, you know, the question is how do we amplify, how do we support those boundary busting efforts and make sure that there are systems in place that allow these things to happen repeatedly and to expand. Salmon recovery, again, I tend to forget the ocean, I'll be honest, but it's important to remember that salmon inhabit the headwaters all the way to the ocean, and everything that happens in that space matters. How much, you know, like the details, of course, we can't necessarily know with certainty until we get out there and we start experimenting around and we learn together. Forest and headwater restoration has such value to the state. And if you look at the value compared to the investment, because we tend to divide resources in the state by population, we have so underinvested in our forests and our headwaters. If we could connect people from our forest and headwaters communities to our urban communities, what kinds of opportunities could we imagine? Um, I've always been mind-boggled by the fact that we have created a system in California where we pretend that surface water and groundwater are separate resources. There seems like such opportunity to get our arms around where we can make progress together if we embrace the fact that it's the same drop of water. Water quality and public health. We this is a huge equity issue. We stick communities with the bill for unhealthy watersheds. That's the fact. Your water comes out of your tap, and you might have to pay a lot for it because there are lots of things that happened around you that may or may not have been in your control. That mean that drop of water had to go through immense treatment to get to your tap safely. If it does, we still have around 1 million people in California who can't turn on their tap and drink their water. That is a system problem locally, but it is also a watershed problem. And then permitting and the pace of implementation. This is just the pain we all share together. It's a great aligning space. It's a great, sectors can come together and wave their fists together at how frustrating it is when you get held up because you can't get the permits or you can't get the inspections or you have to stop your project because somebody else's project is got bumped up in the queue. Um, it, if there were coordination at a larger scale, I wonder, and I hope you all will wonder with us, what we might accomplish together. So I'm wrapping around to the end. I hope you all, if you need to do some stretching and deep breaths, we're almost to the end of the slideshow, and then we're going to break you into breakout groups. So please get your energy flowing. So the great news is that there are lots of opportunities in Prop 4. There are some obvious ones in aligning across programs. As Mary talked about, there's the RFFC Forest Watershed Health Program. There's the Integrated Watershed Program. The Water Board has urban stormwater. I mean, and I just picked some, there's a lot more analysis that we could do on the Prop 4 funds and where there are good intersections, but some really obvious ones. And then I liked section 91030. I don't know if anyone on here can speak to that, but it's funds to improve watershed resilience, including the resilience of fish and wildlife in the watershed. And I could not find where that money is going. So I would love to know that. But certainly all of these resonate with this idea of getting to scale and improving the health of the watershed. And then I also found this language in section 90620 very exciting. So this is not within any of the specific funding sections. This language is ahead of that language and says that basically it gives Natural Resources Agency and its departments, boards, and conservancies the opportunity to fund at scale. That is super exciting, and opens the door for lots of creativity and ingenuity. So just a few examples. We are happy to continue to do analysis and to cultivate conversations around how and where we might be able to leverage dollars to help people get to scale. So in a nutshell, what's at stake? We have $10 billion, 6 priority funding areas, and more than one. I don't know why I said one strategic. There are lots of strategic opportunities. For watersheds, there is one strategic opportunity that can get us to scale. And the key question is, how do we structure this? What support and enabling capacity do folks need to be able to do this? How do we help agencies and departments cross across their silos to figure out where these opportunities are and how to start investing at larger scale? RFFC was a great lean into this space, creating these large block grants and getting them out the door and helping folks to figure it out together. So how can we bring other funding programs along? How can we make sure that we are not stranding our organizational assets? Every region is different, and in every region, the strongest, most integrated, largest scale entities are different. In some places, it's an IRWM. In some places, it might be a GSA. In some places, it might be the RFFC region. How do we grapple with and challenge ourselves to imagine how we leave nothing on the table? We leverage every investment we've made to help. We cannot afford not to leverage every investment we've already made. And the way we are going to do that is by finding our way together. I had a PDF that I could not get into my PowerPoint. that I did want to share. So what we WSN is working in this space, and we've been fortunate to build partnerships with with folks working in the Upper Feather watershed, and we've been working to connect to them with folks in Southern California. And we created this illustration. Um, Partly to help folks really grapple with what watershed health means in a more visually appealing way. And so we wanted the Southern California folks who were visiting to really understand and appreciate that their what they get in Southern California is reliant on this entire array of elements: the forest, the water, the soil, sustainable agriculture, a strong and engaged community, and a vibrant local economy. And so that's true everywhere. And how do we connect this up across a watershed? How do we help the folks in Southern California appreciate the value of the stewardship that the folks in the Upper Feather are carrying? And then likewise, how do we help the folks in the Upper Feather understand and appreciate the care that the folks in Southern California are taking with the water that they're stewarding in the upper watershed? And then, there are a whole bunch of people in between that we're going to start piecing into this conversation. So we are going to break you out into breakout groups. We would like you all to have the opportunity to meet at least a subset of folks. The breakouts we've provided a set of questions for you to chew on. We invite you to use the time as your group chooses to use it. We're going to break you out randomly. We're going to ask one person from each group to copy our instructions into a new Google document. And then you'll take notes in that document. And then at the end of the breakout session, we'll ask you to copy and paste the material back into our main Google document. If you need help with that, you can definitely message any of the team. When you enter your breakout, you're going to pick a scribe and a presenter, and then you're going to introduce yourselves. Again, we really strongly urge you to introduce yourselves as humans first, and then you can go back around really quick and do your organization and positions. We're going to ask you to list the people in your group, and then jump into your conversation, take notes. You can either take notes if you're answering a specific question, you can take notes under that question. If you're just having a general discussion, you can just go to the bottom and take notes, whatever works for your group. We are going to put you into the breakouts for 30 minutes, and then we'll bring you back in and we'll have the groups present, and then we'll just have a general discussion until the end of our time together. All right. Well, we are going to take the rest of our time to hear what you all were talking about. So I'm just going to call on group one. If your group has not already copied and pasted your notes into the main document, it looks like that would be group four. If one of your group members can go ahead and do that. And then group one, who will be presenting?
I will be. Hey, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so we had a great group, and Mary did an awesome job of taking detailed notes in the doc if you'd like to read more about our conversation. We did not go in order at all. We kind of just jumped around and just had a free-flowing conversation. So I'll just share some highlights with everybody. We started out talking about how our bonds are also written in a siloed fashion. And so when we think about the watershed, it evolves naturally to be connected, but then humans come in and slice and dice it into separate functions to the detriment of our outcomes. And then we have kind of funding mirroring that is siloed into these different areas. And so one of the points was it would be ideal for projects to get funding from different chapters to actually support a multi-benefit project. So, the issue now is if you apply for funding in one of those sections, you're limited to the benefits of the project that you might be able to achieve. And I'm just going to read some bold points that Mary put out for us. Somebody shared, we'd like to see funding go to large scale and well coordinated efforts to have these watershed scale outcomes. Often, there's not one organization that can tackle these issues alone. And then another great point that I heard was needing long-term funding to be able to maintain that level of coordination between all the different organizations, and then having kind of an entity that holds that funding so that you can coordinate at a watershed scale.
All right, thank you, group one. I will move on to group two. Who's presenting for group two?
Well, Natalie and I were going to co-present, so I guess we can both talk at the same time. My name is Lauren Navarro. I'm in week 2 as the policy director for sustainable conservation. So I heard brilliant conversation. I contributed more from my background, which was electricity, but soon to be all of this stuff. And I want to thank Anne Marie in particular for writing some really great notes under group 2. So from my perspective, what I heard is like, when you think about the whole watershed, you're talking about the community and the ecosystems and how they integrate together. It's not one individual thing, it's sort of everything. And similarly, when you think about that, it's how do you get those communities to and agencies to work together? And so there's a lot of discussion of capacity building on that, and for smaller entities like tribes to be able to integrate in the conversation and be a meaningful part of the conversation. I think one of my favorite quotes was, we want to catch water, not shed water, which we know is a function of soil health and other things, and having the right infrastructure in place. And I don't think infrastructure is the right word, but the right assets in place. And we don't all that want that water to just go straight down into the ocean. So I think that it's all about health of the ecosystem and health of the communities, and how those two can mutually support each other. We also asked for a chart of grants and contact information, if someone can put that together, so that it's really clear to everybody who would be or could be involved that they're how they can participate, and what the opportunities are, and who the contact people are, and sort of what the timelines are expected to be. So I'm going to invite anyone from my team, including Natalie, if you have a better perspective on some of those things that were said, to chime in.
No, Lauren, I think that was really great summarization. I think I could just add a couple more points. Was that the discussion was really nice to hear from the members in different conservancies, as well as I'm in the water resource engineering background, and then Lauren, I mentioned being in energy before, so it was really cool to see how everyone's different backgrounds and different work can kind of work together. From there, I'm also new to my position, so I'm still learning a lot and getting to see how this proposition will take place. It was good to hear that people have a deep need for the money, and how it can help be used in like a community center aspect for historical centers, as well as for restoration projects, and seeing those needs for a conservancy. I think also it's really good to learn about the catchment as well, so that we can see that the water is not just running out of the water cycle, is that we're catching it. So yeah, I think that will be all for now.
Thank you, and thanks to all of those in our group who contributed to that.
Can I just ask a quick question? I always love it when people are specific about what they need. So the summarizing the funding opportunities. So we can definitely do that. The Natural Resources Agency has a page already that I've already create a table that's a little different, but with the same information. Is that the kind of information you all are looking for, or is it more analytics about like imagining where the potential is, or is it just purely here? I think there are 30 some odd programs. I don't know if Julie's still here, but there are a bunch of them. Is that what kind of information is helpful that you all are looking for?
Well, oh, okay. So if anyone who is talking about that particular issue wants to chime in, if not, I will do my best. But what I heard is that might be a little bit outdated, and it might be time to put some more um, vegetarian incredible meat on the bone. So so that would be things like the agency contact name, the timing, the solicitation expectation. And I was picturing sort of like an org chart of how it all fits together, not, not just a summary. So I think it's some level of detail of, the next steps of how to proceed forward.
I think the challenge that to connect these dots that we're having is that Prop 4 is relatively new. And so I think that folks are wanting more of a dynamic spreadsheet because like people are popping up with, this solicitation knows when it's going to go live. This one isn't going to be live for a year from now. And this one knows they're going to be doing a concept proposal followed by full proposals, something where that information can be updated. And so it'd probably have to be an iterative spreadsheet, I think is
Gotcha.
the only difference from, because I know you have that already, it exists. It's just building it out further.
Yeah, and I really appreciate and second that way of talking about it.
Yeah, that's very helpful, Anne-Marie, to understand what's missing. I'll be doubling back with you and others to see if we can figure out how we can deliver that.
Yeah.
And I think we can give you the name of the person who brought it up too, if you want to
Perfect.
talk with them more directly. Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right. How about group 3?
Yeah, I'll report for group 3. We had a great group. We were largely physical scientists with a good representation from upper watershed folks, either folks who are currently working and living in the upper watershed or have experience there, and folks who had experience with watershed management programs at different scales over the history of California's attempts to approach these problems. And one of the big topics that we talked about was how to not lose the work that was done in those previous programs as we move into this new phase. Making sure that there's a way to leverage that good work, those plans and projects that came from IRWM and maybe even previous programs. And so one idea that came out of that topic was something of a roadmap for how to get from the previous iteration to projects that would be successful in Prop 4, so that we can link them so that they have opportunities to get funded now without having to begin again. A lot of this upper watershed, they're small communities. And so a remark that was repeated a couple times is these are the same folks who are working on these projects throughout time and historically throughout cross topics. So maybe Prop 4 is an opportunity to bring a lot of that together, but it needs to be done in a considered fashion. So this idea of balancing urgency with the complexity of those systems, our group wanted to make sure that the voices of the people who have been engaged in this for a long time, who are there and will continue to be there because they're the ones who live in those small communities, are going to continue to be recognized. And that brought up another question too, was, Debbie, you talked about taking the watershed all the way to the ocean, and that feels complex to some of us. If you're in the high elevation component of a watershed, how does what's important to you get reflected by the time you get down to the delta?
The delta is a very specific place to consider. I got to be honest, our work, we're intentionally leaping over the delta because I think everything gets swallowed in the delta. probably literally and figuratively. So that is an excellent question, and it's part of why we selected uh, the Upper Feather connecting to Southern California as our initial pilot on how you do that. And what I am really happy to say is that it actually is easier than it sounds. And the key thing we have been able to do is to get people from Southern California to the upper watershed. One of the things that we identified early on is that people don't know who's up there, and they have all these stereotypes and all these ideas. And so literally just, getting people together, meeting each other, seeing the work that's being done, has grown a lot of trust between the folks in Southern California and the folks in the Upper Feather. So that's where we are. I would not even begin to suggest that I have a clear path on how we engage the Delta at some point. Our strategy is to work everywhere else in the state and back into the Delta, to be honest.
Great. Thank you.
All right, let's go on to group 4.
I guess I'm the default. It was a bit of crickets in our group when seeking volunteers, so I can step into this role. Um, I think the two most interesting things that came out of our discussion, the first is that the bond language is specifically underscoring cross-jurisdictional work, which feels like a really rare and special opportunity for us to be doing watershed scale interventions. And then related to that is that we had Julie in our group from Natural Resources. And so she was sharing that they're actually developing some best practices, and it's going to be on their climate bond website, where even departments and agents within natural resources have different requirements, different policies, and that they are working to streamline those and make sure that they're all aligned. So at least within the agency, there'll be some more consistency, which feels like a micro to the macro, right? Like if we can't do it at the watershed scale, can we do it within the agencies? Can we do it at the state level? So that was interesting and hopeful for us, especially those of us who work with the state and know how difficult it can be to manage different funding sources from different agencies and different departments. And then the other piece that I wanted to share back was the question about embracing complexity in systems with the need to act urgently, and that even if we can answer that question, the other level is this ebb and flow of funding and the ramp up of programs and the funding cycles and fiscal years, and that it's almost not up to us as grantees, as the boots on the ground doing the work, because so much of the work is dependent on the flow of funds. And so I don't have an answer. More of a question is, is there an opportunity here to create some consistency in the flow of funds so that we can actually do this work in a sustained, predictable, consistent manner, and make some real momentum without having to go back to the drawing board and redo all the studies every 10 years. And if we can keep the work moving, get some momentum going here.
I think that's a bigger question than WSN. However, I'll just put it out there that we've been looking for funding to support considering how we might reform natural resource financing, because it is embedded in how we finance natural resources. And that's, bonds are flashy. They're here and they're gone. General fund is hard to get. Like, I do think you guys are on the right track. That's a huge component to all of this. But it's going to take some political wherewithal. It's going to take somebody having a clear and credible theory, and then the political lift to make it happen. It's really easy to go to the bond market. It just voters are willing to vote for it. You get the money, and you do what you can. But great question, and one that we would love to continue to whittle away at with all of you. How about group 5?
We got a little bit into examples, but I think that some of the themes that came out is that a lot of this work or sustaining watershed scale work comes down to the strength of relationships working within a watershed. We talked about that in the context of like having human infrastructure that meets the needs of the watershed scale, having it be fluid enough to adapt to changing conditions, but rigid enough to like stay together. And that comes down to developing strong relationships. We talked about it also in the context of the dynamic nature of a watershed, that it's like a changing system, and it's kind of the same thing as like strong relationships are, if they're in place, then when conditions change on the ground, folks can come together and problem solve together across sectors and have solutions that are take into account the impacts on different parts of the watershed. And then we talked a little bit about the question about embracing the complexity of the issue, but also acting urgently. We talked a little bit about examples from the RFFCP program where there's like, these are forest collaboratives. Also talked about how forest collaboratives are essentially the same thing as watershed collaboratives. But basically that, there could be certain organizations within a collaborative that have identified like a high priority project, but the forming or development of like a regional collaborative is still in progress, but there's a way to kind of, for the organizations that have identified high priority projects to move forward with those at the same time that, the development of the collaborative is happening. And also that just sometimes to move fast, you have to move slow at the start to make sure that you have a foundation of, everyone understanding each other's work and understanding each other as people. So
I love group fives. I hope it's written down in the notes, the need to be fluid, but then also to be rigid enough. That's a great place to think about how you structure human infrastructure to accomplish both. How about group six?
I'm still here. Bethany took notes for us. I don't know if
Thanks,
she's
Austin.
not. Yeah. We kind of just bounced all over the place as usual, and kind of like the other groups here, and just talked about what the challenges faced us. I mean, Bethany works up in the Sierras, in working with ranchers. I believe Ian was down south working on water quality issues, and I can't remember the third person's name, but she worked in San Jose, with water quality, and water supply. And then, of course, I work in restoration, up and down the state. Talked about the challenges that face each of our communities, and how it could work, how people could work together, when you realize it's not just your watershed you're affecting when you're pumping excess groundwater or changing delivery systems. We also had a last minute ad from Tuolumne Rancheria, where she talked about the aging infrastructure and how these recent storms, the weather was a great thing, but they had trees fall on flumes that were built during the mining era that supplied Tuolumne County with their water. So aging infrastructure. We were just kind of all over the board talking about these things, and I don't think we quite got to Prop 4, unfortunately. But it comes back to one of those things. Like, I think we all suffer the same plight, no matter where we're at in the state with water. And how do we address that? And my thing is effective storytelling, like we always talk about. Not just the narrative of your region, your watershed, but how can you look at everybody that's affected by that watershed and tell a story in the whole that people can relate with to really change thoughts and minds. So that's kind of in brief, without looking at the notes, what I remember.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you all for sharing your thoughts and your feedback. Like I said, we are here. We are interested. We are especially interested in figuring out where we can help folks to expand beyond their existing boundaries, whether that's helping regions cross sectors within a subregion of a watershed, or whether that's connecting people from an upper watershed to an urban community, et cetera. So let us know if you're out there and you have any interest in that. Also, membership is open. So if any of you are interested in becoming members of Watershed Solutions Network, you can reach out to Alyssa or whoever you might have contact information for. But thank you all for hanging out with us this afternoon. I certainly, this inspires me. I've got so many ideas about things we can do moving forward. So many people I want to catch up with, like Kamyar and Nosh. I hope, I don't have your emails. Shoot me an email. But I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation with everyone. And I think we are at a great moment in time. We're ahead of the curve because agencies are just getting into their guidelines and they're leaning in the same direction as we are. So we'll keep talking with you and have a great afternoon and a great weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.